You are listening to the On Purpose podcast. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the On Purpose podcast. It's always our pleasure and privilege to show up and meet you each week. This week, one of the things I want to start adding is people know we travel and we record each episode from somewhere different, usually off grid, using our solar setup and living out of our Airstream as we get to explore and write a new chapter in our lives. So thought this week I would kick off and let you know that we are recording this series of episodes outside of Wickenburg, Arizona, a real cool little cowboy town kind of up in the mountains about 80 miles north of Phoenix. And yeah, man, I get to sit here and look at Vulture Peak as I talk with people around the world and share their stories with you. And I can't tell you how humbling that is. So this week, I'm excited to have a guest on who's known for her TED Talk titled Not Seeing is About Believing, where she discusses her experiences and insights on belief and perceptions. She's a published author, speaker, and her work featured in an international best-selling book, Voices of the 21st Century. She's an expert in helping women increase their emotional intelligence to grow their leadership and earning potential. And she's going to be one of our newest friends. So I hope you enjoy this week's interview with Melani Luedtke-Taylor. Enjoy the show. Melani, my newest friend, welcome to the On Purpose podcast.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. Such a great day to be here.
It's a perfect day to be here. I love when people start the mornings with like a great feeling about it.
Yes. Well, you should start every morning that way, or at least try to.
How do
Makes
you?
for a better day.
Oh, for sure, for sure. How do you do that? Do you have a system to start your morning?
I try to set my goals every day just to make sure I know what I need to get done. And that always makes me feel better. Like it's like, oh, I get to check things off my list and feel really good about my day.
All
So,
right. You're a list haver. You have lists.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I like to feel that sense of accomplishment,
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, Melanie, I like to always start off with the guests and let them know how much I appreciate them. One, for coming on our show to share their message, but even bigger than that, for having the courage to share your message and to step into the fears and the unknown and put your story out there so that it can benefit people around the world. And I just really want to thank you for doing that and for the way you do it with your passion and sharing your story with humor. As I prepared for this episode, I was very touched by your message, and I just want to thank you for having the courage to share it.
Well, thanks. It was the first time I did it with my TEDx. That was really the first time I had ever shared anything about my message. And it was really hard, but it was probably the best thing that I'd ever done. Because I was really told um, by my dad growing up not to share it,
Yeah.
for the fear
Yep.
of the challenges that come with it. And when I told him I was doing it, he was really scared for me. But it's turned out great. And it's, you know, sometimes fear is just it's not really fear. It's
Mm.
that, you're afraid of something that isn't really going to be a problem. So
And that's something. I was just having this talk with my son the other day about how many things we're afraid of that are not physical things, right? Like if you said, like we're just talking about pressure, like just feeling a lot of pressure. And I was like, well, go out and grab me some pressure. Let's put this pressure in a bag. I want to see how heavy it is. Like we can't get it because it's
right.
all in our heads.
Well, the same thing with anxiety, anxiety about the future in particular. You don't know what's going to happen. Like you may think you may know what's going to happen, but the reality is most things that you're anxious about never ever happen. So
Yeah.
I still struggle with that every day. I really do.
Well, I hope you're not anxious about this show because you're welcome
Yeah.
here, my friend. But now before we get into some of the TED Talk, not seeing is about believing, right? Like that
Mhm.
and the story of your fight with your eyesight and stuff. I wanted to warm you up, right? Because we got to have a warm up here. We got to lighten things up to get things started. So are you ready for this, Melanie?
Absolutely. What you got?
Well, I think I know the first answer before we start recording, but are you a coffee or tea person?
Definitely a tea
I
person.
knew
I like
it.
coffee okay, but I like my tea. Be a
Yeah.
nice human. Like my tea.
What are you drinking? What kind of tea?
I usually drink Earl Grey or
Mm,
British breakfast, one of the two. I'm a black tea drinker.
okay. You got relative, are your family from England or something?
No, but Ireland, right?
Okay.
So yeah, I'm
All
an Irish
right.
girl,
All
and
right.
one of my favorite things I've ever done is gone on over to Ireland
Ooh.
and just sat down and had a traditional tea in the
Mm.
afternoon. It was amazing.
They have a biscuit with it in Ireland too?
Yes,
Okay.
cakes and yeah, Devonshire cream is so good.
See,
So
I will admit selfishly, I ask these questions so we get to know you, but I really like knowing what other people are eating and drinking and stuff so I could try more stuff.
yeah. Well, you need to try Devonshire cream if you have not.
Devonshire
It is
cream.
yes, it is the best thing you can put on like a biscuit of some
Mm.
sort. It's amazing with little jam.
Yeah, and see, we're
Highly
recording this
recommend.
nice and early, so it's gonna set us up good for breakfast.
There you go. Exactly.
All right, next question, Melanie. Brunch or dinner? Which combination meal are you going for?
Oh my gosh, I will do either brunch or dinner as long as it's breakfast food. Good either
Oh,
way.
you're an all-day breakfast person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Pancakes even late at night, or where are you going with that?
Absolutely.
Really?
Pancakes, French toast. I'll make that for dinner anytime.
Okay, I love it. That's a good one. All right, sunrises or sunsets?
I am a night owl, so it's got to be sunsets.
Mm.
Very, very rarely do I see a sunrise. I hate to say it. I'm just not a morning person, never happened. So sunset for sure.
Okay. Reading a book or listening to an audiobook?
Well, I actually had somebody ask me this the other day too. I love to read books, but unfortunately, with my eyesight the way it is now, I have to listen to them.
Mm.
So I'm unfortunately cannot read normal print size books any longer.
Is that a recent development?
Probably within the last couple of years, for
Okay.
sure. It just got harder and harder, and I finally just kind of said, okay, that's enough. I'm not going to stress myself out about it anymore. And so I went to Audible books instead.
Do you have a favorite audiobook you've listened to lately?
Wow. I listen to so many. There is a what is it called? The Librarian of Crooked Lane, I want to say, series is really good. It's like a historical fiction mystery kind of book. And I'm big into historical fiction. So pretty much that's what I'll be listening to. If I'm not listening to anything business related, it'll be historical fiction.
Okay, nice. All right, you got to get your mind right. You got something big going on. It's weighing. You got to get your thoughts together. Do you go silence or do you put on music?
Oh, ooh, that's a good question.
Thanks.
That's a good question. I like silence to think. I like music not to think, if that makes sense.
Mm,
I like
silence to.
silence to think.
Okay.
One of those people who turns down the radio station when when I was driving and had to think about where I was going, turn
Right,
down the
right.
radio, like that had anything to do with it, but did it anyway. Um, but I like music to not think, like
Mm.
just to kind of more zone out and just relax.
What's your go-to song?
Mm, I like all music. Honestly, I don't think there's, except for maybe country, a lot of country I don't really care for, but mostly any other kind of music I'll listen to.
Okay, so if you got to pull up one artist in Spotify or wherever you're listening, who you pulling up? I should actually just start making people have their phone with them and pull up the last song they played.
I have a whole YouTube music list
Oh,
that I
your
listen
YouTube.
to. Right now, I'm listening to a lot of AJR.
Mm.
If you've not heard of AJR, it's more
Uh,
alternative.
okay.
So I'm listening to a lot of AJR, and I listen to a lot of U2. Huge U2 fan, always have been.
All right.
So, Guns N' Roses, like I listen to a lot of things.
Yeah, U2 is. I've always liked U2 as well. I wanted to go see them at the Sphere, but I don't know if I'll pull that off.
I tried, and I'm like, I don't think I can justify that amount of money to go see a band at the Sphere. The ticket alone was 500, then you got to fly and you got to stay, and it's like, and I've been to several U2 concerts
Okay.
at least. My favorite was probably at the Bear Stadium in Chicago,
Soldier Field.
at Soldier Field. But yeah, I just couldn't do it at the Sphere. I bet it's amazing.
I bet it is, but I gotta be honest with you, Melanie. My attention span doesn't seem to last as long as it used to.
You know, really?
I'm not sure I could, like, I don't know.
Sit through
Like,
a whole
well, and the Sphere's got so much going on. Like, I wouldn't know what to be paying attention to. It's a lot of pressure.
has so much going on. I sent my brother and sister-in-law to the Sphere Experience in Vegas the last time they were there. They loved it, but they came back and said there's just something going on all the time. So maybe it's good for your ADD a little bit. Maybe you'd enjoy it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Why are you feeling warmed up, Melanie? All
Absolutely.
right, I want to let's obviously start. We talked about your eyesight and stuff in your TED talk. Kind of share, is that, would you consider that your origin story? Is that kind of where things go?
Actually, no, I think it's a part of it.
Yeah,
So I started my corporate journey. So I started in corporate with IBM when I was 18 years old. I got a summer intern job, if you will, like just a summer job. And it just kind of grew into a whole career. So I ended up staying there for about 25 years, actually. Um, Mostly in marketing and events. And I was doing marketing in my late 20s. I had a family member who actually uh, sat me down with a coach because I was like, I don't know. I fell into this, right, when I was a kid, really.
sure.
And I was like, I don't know that this is really what I want to do. And what am I supposed to choose? The one thing I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life. I didn't know
Mm.
at 18 I really needed to choose that. I just kind of fell into it. And she looked at me and I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, "Why do you just have to do one thing?" And that kind of fed into, I told you I was like multi-passionate anyway.
Yeah.
That kind of fed into that, right? It was, yeah. And why do I just have to do one thing? Why do I just have to be one thing for the rest of my life? That sounds crazy to me now that she said it out loud. So I wrote a vision board and I
Mm.
just said, these are all the things I want to do. These are just all the things that I want to accomplish. Um, and everything was on there. It was like getting my MBA. And at the time, I hadn't even finished my bachelor's degree because I had been working full time since I was 18. Finished my MBA, do a TED talk was on there, write a book, like these big things that I just didn't even think I didn't know when that was going to happen,
Sure.
but I wanted to do those things. And so I set out to really just do all the things, basically, just do all the things. And that's kind of what really started it, right? And now my eyesight, I was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease when I was 16. My brother has it, my dad has it. It's a whole family thing. We all have it. It's called retinitis pigmentosa. And basically, what it does is it destroys the rods and cones in your retina. So you get peripheral vision loss. So you end up getting more and more tunnel vision as you get older.
Sure.
And it's progressive. So you never know when that's going to happen or how it's going to happen. My grandfather, he had it, he died totally blind. My dad has very, very little vision
Mm.
left. He's in his 70s now. My brother and I, we don't see in the dark at all. We don't drive anymore. So, you know, it just progresses throughout your life. And so I wanted to get all these things done
Mm.
before my time ran out, if that makes sense,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
In the back of my mind, it was like, is my time going to run out to
Mm.
do all these things and be all these things?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second because I think sometimes people, because we think we always have tomorrow and everything's going to be exactly the same tomorrow as it is today, we put off doing stuff. So you think like having maybe not necessarily a definite like this is going to happen by this date, but knowing that it's going to be changing and tomorrow isn't given for you with your eyesight. Do you think that gave you that purpose, like get this done now?
It really did. It really did because I'm definitely one of those people that first of all, I was an event manager for years and years, so I'm a very good planner, but I plan,
Mm,
right? And I had to plan for those things to happen because it was a given. Now, the how blind I might go is not a given.
sure.
How quickly that might happen is not a given. But losing more and more of my eyesight was a given, right?
Mm,
Until they find a cure,
yeah.
which they have not yet. So, until that happens, it's very much a given that I'd have less and less eyesight, right? So, yeah, so I think I really did set out to kind of do all these things and be all these things um in case my time ran out. Now, when
Yeah.
I say time ran out, the older I've gotten now, the sillier that sounds. Because being blind or having less vision
Yeah.
is not a death sentence in any stretch of the
For sure.
imagination. It's not, right? And I have a very positive attitude about that. Like it's a difficult. There are days when it's even more difficult, but it's I'm here
Hmm.
and I'm enjoying the life that I can enjoy and doing the things that I can do.
I
So,
love that, and I think that that's perfect for the perspective we're in today, right? Like, because now you're like, oh, I have this. But I want to go back to you said you realized it around 16,
I was
and
diagnosed at 16.
okay, it's
Mhm.
16. Talk me through the emotions there because you come out on the other side as a fighter. You're not laying down for this. Talk me through the process of accepting it and going, wait a second, I can still define my life. I'm going to take charge of this.
Mhm.
Talk us through that.
I think I kind of always knew, if that makes sense. Like I always knew. Even I got my first pair of glasses when I was 5, and I think even then I knew. I knew my
Mm,
dad struggled with it, obviously. I knew my uncles did. I knew my grandfather did. And even though I'm the only woman that that's happened to, they're all men otherwise. I just kind of always knew. And so when I was diagnosed at 16, I was kind of like, oh, okay. Well, there you go. There you have it, right?
okay.
Now it's on paper. But I kind of always knew. And I think because I always knew, it wasn't as big of a revelation. It was just like, okay, well that there we go. That makes sense. And I think that's though what jump started me into having more of a drive. Like
Hmm.
just the final knowing was just like, okay, well, that's fine. Let's go. And even at 16, I realized that.
What would you say is your moment where you were like, okay, I am bigger than anything that happens to me? Was there a time for you when you were like, man, this not just your eyesight, but just I think it's a great parallel for our lives. Like we're gonna have bad days and bad news and good news, but that we are just like you said earlier, like we're always blessed, no matter
Yeah.
what's happening. Was there a specific moment you had younger where you're like, okay, I'm gonna be fine and I'm gonna excel?
Yeah, I think it was that 20s moment, when I talked to the coach and she told me I didn't have to just be one thing. I really think that was the moment where I was just like, "Oh, well then I'm gonna be great."
I love
I
it.
think up until that moment, I really had thought I'm gonna be held back by this.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I'm held back by this. I have to choose a career that I can do for the long term that's not gonna have such an impact on my eyesight, which is hard to find,
Yeah.
right? So I up until that moment, I felt like I was really hand tied and really, I wanted to be a nurse. Well, no one wants me poking them with needles, right? Like
Right.
that's not going to happen. And I was okay with that. That was fine. Um, and I just knew I was going to be fine at that point. I knew that because I wanted to do all these things and I didn't just have to choose one of them, that I can continually reinvent myself if I needed to.
Mm,
And I had the strength to do that.
And I love, and you had the strength. I want to know about the relationship with the coach. How did you find this coach?
It was actually I was introduced to her through one of my family members. He knew her. He said, "Hey, why don't you come to lunch with us, have a discussion?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it," you know. And I've always wanted to be a coach, and I now have my coaching certification, but I had always wanted to do that. I thought maybe that was my purpose, and
Mm,
so that's how we got, connected. And she probably doesn't even remember the conversation, if I'm really honest.
yeah.
Like, it was just a passing lunch with somebody she knew, and but it stuck with me for forever, is just that simple statement that she made.
And see, I love that. And what I love most about that for our community is you had the courage to go outside of your normal circle, right? To go
Yeah,
sit down with somebody that had a different perspective that wasn't, I don't want to say if going to feel sorry for you, but was just going to tell you the truth as they saw it, right? They didn't know the whole
yeah,
story. And I think sometimes when we're faced with difficult decisions, it's easier to stay in our comfort circle with the people that are going to tell us what we want to hear.
absolutely. And that's, you don't grow that way,
Right.
really. You don't. And I think it's really important to find people outside your comfort zone who are just going to give it to you straight. And it's okay. Like, that's okay. And I also think it's important because they open your eyes to other things you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
so simple. Why do you just have to be one thing? Like, it just seems so simple,
Right. No, I
but it
love
didn't
it.
occur to me.
No, I love it. And you're multi-passionate. I love that term. And what I really enjoy about that is you give yourself the leeway to have all these different ideas and different avenues to pursue. You don't put yourself in one lane and identify with just one thing.
Yeah. And it's a good thing to be, and it's also a really hard thing to be. If I'm really honest, like,
Yeah.
I'm passionate about education as a lifelong learner. Like, I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate about women, young women especially, growing and being self-confident leaders. I am passionate about just simple things like crafting. Like, I love to craft. Like, it's just, you can be multi-passionate. The challenges with being multi-passionate is choosing what to get done when,
Mm.
right? It's can you finish something without going to the next shiny object? Like, can you follow through and finish what you want to finish? Um, and that's always the challenge with someone who's multi-passionate, is don't bounce from one thing to another. Is, if you're passionate about this, then put some goals in place and accomplish it,
Okay.
right? Or accomplish something.
Yeah, talk me through that because as you're saying multi-passionate, a couple people that I know in my circle that are always like they're into this and into that and into this sometimes fail to follow all the way through, right?
Yeah.
They get distracted and they're off, and then they have like three half-finished projects, but nothing completely done.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
share with us, if you would, Melanie, what are some tips you have to make sure your multi-passion is still productive?
Yeah. My craft closet will definitely show half finished projects all over the place. But to follow through, really you have to make sure you are doing it for the right reason, right? Was it just the next shiny object, or was it really something that you want to see finished? And sometimes it's just to fill your time or whatever, and that's fine. That's what I consider my unfinished crafting
For
closet.
sure.
That's like a I just like to do many things, and I want to fill my time. I don't need to finish the project to feel
Right.
accomplished. But when it comes to, like, coaching a young woman, that's not something I can just not finish, right?
Mm.
So I like to, one, make sure I understand what the end goal is, even
Yep.
write it down. Here is the end goal that I need to get to. Here are the steps that I need to take to get to that end goal. And then I hold myself accountable, right? If that's every week I need to work on it for 3 hours, then I schedule that in my calendar. Maybe I'll tell someone else to help me be held accountable
Yep.
too. somebody I trust who can call me and say, hey, are you working on that today? Because you need to get it done today. So I think there's something to say about making sure that you have some accountability to
Yeah.
yourself to finish what you want to finish.
So you're a vision boarder, which I
I am.
fully believe in. I think creating images and putting it out to the universe is how we attract what we
Yes.
want. So do you do the same with your accountability piece? Is that somewhere where you can look at it readily and know like, oh, I'm supposed to be on track here?
Absolutely. I keep it forward, like at the front of my notebook or on my laptop as a screensaver,
Yeah.
whatever it may be,
Okay.
so that I'm constantly seeing it so that I don't forget about it. Because it's very easy to get involved in something
Mhm.
else that you're passionate about and forget that you were trying to finish that. So I think the seeing, the hearing, the making sure you hold yourself accountable, those are all really important pieces for a multi-passionate person to try to finish a project.
I like the term multi-passionate because that's definitely a more positive spin on some other terms you might use to describe those
Yeah.
characteristics.
So true.
um, since you brought it up, let's just stay here, Melanie. Talk to me about coaching young women
Mhm.
um, to increase their emotional intelligence for leadership. I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah, so it's taken me a long time to really figure out because I think of passionate and purpose as two kind of different things. They go together, but they're not exactly the same, right?
Okay.
This is what passion is what I really enjoy and what
Hmm.
drives me, but purpose is also what drives me, but also helps other people.
Sure.
That's kind of how I define purpose in my head.
Okay.
And so my purpose in helping young women, I think um so I had this really long corporate career. I was a leader in that corporate career and I really enjoyed managing people and leading people. And I enjoyed it because I enjoyed helping people get to where they wanted to go, right? Um, and that was really important to me to be a strong leader was to be a servant leader and really help the people that reported to me achieve their goals. That's why I wanted to be a manager, and it's how I led being a manager.
Sure.
When I stopped kind of being a manager, I was missing that piece. I was really missing helping people achieve their goals. And so, yeah, so I went and I got my certification in um, DISC and motivators and
Yep.
emotional intelligence assessments because I think that it helps to understand where you currently are before we can help you figure out where you need to be. And so now I work with young women who maybe just don't have a direction or just aren't sure what their direction needs to be. Maybe they want to be a leader, but they don't have the strong enough skills. Maybe they just need help kind of determining how do I get my next job
Sure.
or how do I have more self-confidence to put myself out there, whatever it may be. That's how I really help young women. We were foster parents as
Yeah.
well. So we've adopted an 18-year-old, and now
Oh,
her bio sister has kind of come into our family too. And so,
congratulations.
um, yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
it's young women just they need role models and they need that extra support to grow into self-confident women. And so that's what I consider my purpose to be is to be that role model and to help them grow into being those women who are going to take on the world. That's what I hope.
Yeah, I love. What do you? I love that. That's what you've out of your whole stories. That's where you're focused now, right?
Mhm.
Um, what do you think are some of the biggest obstacles to getting our young women to step into that role?
Yeah. The first one is just self-confidence. Honestly,
Sure.
it is how much they are bombarded with visions on social media and comparing themselves to people all day, every day, whether it be on TikTok or in the media or whatever. there is this there's this comparison. I'm not doing as well as that
Mm.
person, or I'm not doing as much as that person, or how do I get to be that person? Or, there's this sheer lack of just self-confidence. And then the second thing would be action, right?
Oh,
It's
sure.
action. Good things come to those who wait. Not really.
No.
Good things come to those that take action. And so how do you take action is where they kind of get stopped, is they get so overwhelmed with what is happening, in their lives, in the
Mm.
world, that they don't know how to just move one step forward. You don't have to take big leaps. And I think that's what a lot of them that I've talked about, that's what they think. Is like, if I'm not taking like this big,
Mm-hmm.
huge step, then I'm not making any progress. And the reality is you just need one little step to
Right.
make progress. So
Yeah.
there's this misconception, I think it's kind of a combination of a misconception and self-confidence that really is driving that biggest challenge.
Talk to me about this. How would you navigate a young lady, or how would you coach her to walk that fine line of being assertive and leadership, but not over the top demanding, right? Because I think sometimes women, at least in my professional experience, women get caught in this gray zone where if they're too assertive, they get labeled as bossy, or nobody wants to be around them. Like they're gonna tell you what to do all the time. And if they're not assertive, they're too shy or timid. And so they have like a real small margin where I'll be quite honest, I think guys have a much greater leeway in how they manage, because people are like, it's just a guy, don't pay attention to what he says or how he says it. It's just the message. How do we coach our women through something like that?
Yeah. So it's such a double-edged sword. It's
Right,
it's such a double standard, frankly, between men and women. That shouldn't exist, but it does.
right,
So we'd be totally remiss to say that it really does exist, but it shouldn't.
sure.
Um, but it's funny that you asked that question, because when I was younger and I was looking to be a leader, I had my VP, my vice president, had a meeting with him, and kind of like an exec interview kind of thing. And he was like, "You'll never be a manager in this organization." And I said, "Okay, tell me why." And
Yeah,
he said, "Well, because you're too nice.
yeah,
Because you're too nice." And I went, "Well, that's insane. Like
yeah,
that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense at all." And a couple years later, I was a leader, right? And the reality is that you can lead with empathy and
mm,
still be effective,
yeah,
right? That is the challenge. It's leading with and caring about your people, but using all the tools that are available to you to do that effectively, right? So, for example, you know, having having the ability to switch between leadership styles for each person that you manage is really important. Each person is a person. You're not leading a team, you're leading individual people. And individual people have different needs
uh-huh,
on how they need to be led, right?
yep,
Some people want to be told what to do. That is the only way they get things done, is they want to be told what to do. Other people need the flexibility to make decisions and understand what they're doing. They might ask the question why a lot, and need that background, but they want to run off and do it, and they do it well, right? Because you've told them why, and they'll
yep,
just run and do it. So each individual needs something different. And I think for women, young women, especially young leaders, they kind of forget that. Like, you're in the position to serve the people that you are leading.
yeah,
You aren't, the title means nothing. At the end of the day, the title means nothing. So lead with empathy, lead with knowing your people and what they need,
yep.
and you'll be an effective leader.
I love it. And what I'm hearing you describe there is women leading by their natural strengths, right?
Mhm.
Emotion,
Yes.
empathy,
Empathy. Mhm.
intuitiveness
Yeah.
are all very mother-like skills, right? If a mom has three kids, not all three kids are going to respond the exact same to parenting, right? They're all going to want a little something different here or there. And I think that's one of the great transitions. I would even say for our current generation and into our future is much more emotional intelligence leadership.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that the World Economic Forum lists emotional intelligence as one of their top skills for future leaders,
For
right?
sure.
It really is. So it's it's important to understand that there are multiple factors within emotional intelligence, right? You have to be there's self-awareness, so understanding yourself and how you respond to things is really important. um Self-management, like how do you then control your emotions and how do you control how you react to things. um and then you have the social side, which is social management and social awareness, which is about empathy and understanding how people are going to react to what you tell them. And then being able to manage to that, so that's all what
Yep.
encompasses emotional intelligence. And I think the unfortunate reality is that as much as I enjoy social media as well, a lot of that has diluted our ability to understand and respond appropriately to other people
Mm,
because you don't see their response,
yeah.
right? If you put something out in the world,
Sure.
you're not actually seeing someone respond to it. And that's an important part of understanding how to relate to other people is seeing their response.
Yep.
So it's something to think about. As you know, social media is not going away. So how do you get more emotional intelligence with your responses and think about how are people going to react to this, and am I okay with that, and kind of put yourself through those questions.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I think, but I gotta tell you, Melanie, I'm a big believer in this podcast. I think is part of proof, at least in my little world, that there is still a very great place for long form conversations, for seeing each other. And even though you and I are in different places, I can still watch your facial expressions. I can communicate with all my senses, right? Like I visual and I'm audio and I'm speaking. Um, and I think that's what we make time for.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a lot less now, right? Like these types of conversations are just less. People like to do business over email or
Sure.
text or whatever it may be, which is fine for quick decision making or informational type of, just gathering.
Yeah.
But to have a conversation builds relationships.
Yeah. And
Text isn't going to really build a relationship.
no,
So,
no, and I love what you said earlier about employees or people, right? And I would even take that a step further for anybody that's listening that's in a leadership role that gets to impact people. Every person you get to impact is actually a family, right? You think about it, you and I, like whatever time we're spending right now is taking time away from our families. Right,
yeah.
and so my family hopes that I'm learning something from Melanie because I just spent this time with her, right? We're in a workplace, you have me 40 hours, 40 plus hours a week. My family hopes you're investing in me to make me better. I shouldn't be returning you home damaged goods.
Right.
And,
Right. I agree.
and
I think we all forget that. Like we all have this tiny sphere,
mm,
right? It might be your family, could be maybe the church you belong to, maybe it's your block or your neighborhood, but the sphere of people that you actually spend your time with is rather quite small.
yes,
And so, again, going back to what we talked about getting out of your comfort zone, get out of that little sphere to broaden your thinking and to broaden your understanding. And so when you're a leader, like you could be leading, I was leading people all around the world, right? That was my team. My team didn't sit in an office. We were
okay,
remote. We didn't sit in my office and they were able to walk into my office. That's not how we operated. I had people in Alaska. I had people in, Australia. And so you had to understand not just what their driving motivators were, but also what are the challenges they'd have outside
Mm.
of work? What are they dealing with in their communities? And I'll never forget, like, I lost someone during COVID, on our team, and that was really hard for the entire team to wrap their heads around. Um, and it was such a challenge, but you had to know that that was going on in the world and how to then, respond to that. And that's what emotional intelligence is. If someone, passes away on your team, how does that affect the rest of your team members? And how are you going to respond to it as a leader so that it lessens the burden on everyone else too? Even though you're hurting, like, you're a leader, it's your job to help make sure they get through it. And so
Yeah.
when I'm talking emotional intelligence, I talk about it all from the perspective of it's really about just understanding yourself and understanding how to respond to other people. And I think the way my eyesight plays into that is I never told anybody at work
Yeah.
that I had this. I was running massive conferences, like 20,000 person conferences. And I never told anybody because I was afraid that someone would think I wasn't able to do my job,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That some reason I couldn't all of a sudden do my job because I have this problem. And it took me, honestly, I was walking through this massive hallway, actually at the MGM Grand, and I was walking with one of my coworkers, and I ran smack into a cement bench that was in the middle of this massive hallway.
Okay.
Like, had no business being where it was, but I didn't see it.
Right.
And I ran smack into it. And she was like, okay, that's a little weird. Like, so we, I had to tell her. I had to tell her what other
Right.
reason was there. Um, and she was perfectly fine with it. She's like, "Oh, okay." And I found ways to deal with it. I found ways to delegate where I needed
Mm.
and I made sure that I was available in other ways. And so, for years I was able to manage to it. But I think what ties that into the emotional intelligence is, for myself, I was scared to tell anybody. I didn't know how they were going to react. I
Yeah.
hadn't put a lot of thought into, except for what my dad told me, don't tell
Right.
anybody,
Right.
you know. Um, so you had to trust people. I had to trust people. And then on the other side of that, there are so many people with hidden disabilities. If you see me on the street, I don't look blind. I don't use a cane. I wear these regular glasses, but I only have about 10% of my vision left, right? So I don't look like I have that, that I think people think blind is either you don't have any eyesight or you have all your eyesight, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no gray zone.
Yeah.
The fact is, most people live in the gray zone,
Mm.
whether they have macular degeneration or RP or anything else, they live in the gray zone. So we don't look blind to you. And you don't have to know my story to have empathy for people with hidden disabilities, whether that's depression or anxiety or anything else. So when you're leading, you don't have to know someone's story to have empathy. Start with empathy
Mm.
and go from
And we can apply that in our daily life, right? Like if I randomly meet you today, I don't have to know your whole story to give you a little grace, to be kind to you, to
there. Right,
smile.
right. And I think if there's one thing I want your listeners to understand, it's that, right? Like, everyone has a story. You don't have to be going blind to have a story. You could be dealing with, a child who's sick at home, or taking care of an ailing parent, or, I mean, there's a million things that people are dealing with
Yeah.
every day. And you don't have to know their story to have some empathy and to be kind. You don't have to know that.
You know what I love about that, Melanie, is generally, I think if you're kind to others, and you give grace to others, you're probably going to be kind to yourself and give grace to yourself, right? Like it starts with you.
Yeah.
And what a
Agreed.
great freeing, even as we're talking about leadership, if we swing back all the way back corporate leadership or business leadership, when I lead with emotional intelligence, when I lead through caring, right? You know you actually matter to me. You know you're more than just a cog in the machine.
Yep.
One of the great things it does is it relieves me of having to be perfect. Because if I do make a mistake, you'll give me grace because you know
Right.
I'm trying just like you are.
Wouldn't it be nice if we just all gave each other a little grace?
Yeah.
Think how different the world would be if we just all gave each other just a little grace. You
And
know,
what more might we do if we relieve the burden of trying to be perfect, knowing
mm,
that if I stumbled, people would be, hey, man, at least you tried, instead of
right,
making fun of you for failing.
right. Well, and I will tell you one of the things that young women mostly deal with is that voice inside their head that tells them the negative things,
Yep.
right? And I think we all have that voice,
Yep.
but I see it much worse with young women.
Mm.
You know, I'm fat, I don't look good in these clothes, I'm not smart enough for that job, whatever it is they're telling themselves. And I do a lot of work where we try to change that, right? Like we work on first you got to know that you're talking to yourself like that. So if you're saying something to yourself that you wouldn't even say to somebody else, why are you saying it to
Mm.
yourself? That's
Thank you.
crazy,
Thank
right?
you. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So taking a moment to change that around and saying, it's not that I'm not smart enough. I just haven't taken that chance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like I have everything I need to take that chance. Let me go take that chance. You know, changing that voice is a real challenge for some people. And but if you're able to give yourself grace, you're able to give other people grace.
Yeah.
I
I did
agree.
a I did an episode a while back now. It's called "What Did You Say?" And right, like, if, and that my example was just that. If I was walking down the street and somebody came out and said, "You're a dumb idiot, you stupid, you look foolish," I'd almost be ready to fight, right? I'd be like, "Whoa, what are you coming at me like that for?" Like,
Right, exactly.
but because I could go
Right.
do it in my own mirror or on my own head, nobody knows I'm saying that,
Yeah,
right? We could fix
yeah.
that
But you're beating yourself down for no
for
reason.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem.
Okay, so talk to me. So say I'm one of your students or you're somebody I come across and you know I have just negative self-talk and I'm just struggling to silence this. What
Yeah.
are some tips you would share with them?
Well, first you have to really be aware of it,
For
right?
sure.
You have to be aware that it's happening. So if that means that you take a moment and you write it down,
Mm,
or you take a moment and you just kind of check it off in your head and say, "Oh, okay, that was uncalled for," right?
yeah.
Like knowing that you're doing it is step number one.
Okay.
Because if you fly by it and you don't really recognize that you're doing it, you can't change it. Awareness is absolutely key, number one. Number two is to switch it around to something positive,
Mm,
right? It's whatever it may be, right? I'm not successful enough. All right. How do you switch that around and say the opportunities that I've been given, I've taken,
yep.
right? Or the I need to find another opportunity or find someone who's going to help me get that opportunity, right? Make it into something positive or actionable,
Yep.
right? If it's not something you can turn around positive, make it actionable. And then really keep a list. Like I am so for the writing things down helps you to not only recognize but helps you to change.
Mm,
If you see the things on paper that you're telling yourself that you wouldn't tell anybody else, it just gives you that ability to start writing out what you need to say to yourself instead, right? If you can't do it in the moment,
yep.
take the time to do it because talking to yourself in a positive way, I not that I believe in manifestation,
Yep.
like I believe that there's a lot there. If you think it, that's what you become. I'm lazy.
For
Okay,
sure.
it just perpetuates laziness, right?
Yep.
You really need to switch that, just turn it around on itself. I am going to give myself grace today and be quiet today and lazy today. And tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. No, I agree. The most important conversation you have is the one with yourself every day.
Yep.
Because it sets the
Absolutely.
tone for every other conversation.
Yep. And it is what you become.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what you think is what you become.
I love it. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for joining us this week and allowing us to share your story. Where can our community stay in touch with you and follow along on your journey?
Absolutely. So you can email me. I love getting emails from listeners just with questions. So you can email me at melanie@totalleadershipcenter.com,
Okay.
totalleadershipcenter.com, all one word. Or you can find us on www.totalleadershipcenter.com. Either one is great. Or look me up in LinkedIn too. Like, I'm happy for people to connect. I don't do a lot on social because I don't spend my time there. I like
Okay.
spending time one-on-one with people, but I love getting emails and just connections.
I love it. Melanie, thank you so much again. It's been an honor to share your story, and you just
Thank
keep lighting the
you.
world one day at a time, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.